My name is Willa Langford, and I'm 41 years old. This morning, my sister, the one who vanished from our lives 7 years ago without a phone call, without a birthday card, who didn't even show up to our mother's funeral, knocked on my front door wearing a black dress, standing next to a man in a gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm contesting the will. My dad just passed. He left me his house, the one he built with his own hands, valued at $415,000, and my sister thinks she's owed a piece of it, after 7 years of silence. She didn't know that Dad had been preparing for this exact moment, and all I needed was one piece of paper, before I tell you what happened. But please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the story, and while you're here, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 7 years, to the night Renee walked out of this house for the last time. It was a Thursday in October. I remember because Mom had made pot roast, her Thursday tradition, and the whole house smelled like garlic and rosemary. Dad sat at the head of the table, same spot he'd occupied for 30 years. Mom was across from him, I was to his left, Renee was to his right, and she hadn't touched her plate. She'd driven in from Columbus that afternoon with a folder. Inside was a printout from a real estate site. Our house. Estimated value. A number circled in red ink. "Sell it," she said. "Split the money 4 ways. I need $200,000 to start over." Her divorce from Craig had just finalized. She'd lost the apartment, her credit cards were maxed, she needed a lifeline, and she'd decided our parents' home was it. Dad set his fork down. "This house isn't for sale, Renee. It's just walls and wood, Dad. It's our home. Your home, not mine. Not anymore." Mom reached for Renee's hand. Renee pulled away. "If you won't help me, then I have nothing left to say to any of you." She pushed back from the table, grabbed her keys off the counter. Mom started crying. Quiet, the way she always cried, like she was apologizing for her own tears. At the front door, Renee turned around. She wasn't looking at Mom or Dad. She was looking at me. "You're going to rot in this house taking care of them. And nobody will ever thank you." The screen door slammed. Her headlights swept across the front yard. Then nothing. I cleared her plate, washed it, put it back in the cabinet. Dad sat at the table for another hour without speaking. Mom went to bed early. That was the last time I saw my sister for 7 years. The first year, I called every week. Voicemail. Texts went unread. I mailed a Christmas card to her last known address. It came back unopened. The second year, Mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. Stage 3. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon in the oncologist's office, sitting in a plastic chair that squeaked every time I shifted. Mom held my hand and said, "Don't tell your sister." I told her anyway. Left a voicemail, sent a letter. Nothing. I rearranged my shifts at the clinic. Mornings with patients, the afternoons driving Mom to chemo at the hospital 40 minutes away. I learned which gas stations had clean bathrooms along the route because the drugs made her sick without warning. I memorized the nurses' names. I packed saltine crackers in a Ziploc bag every single time. Mom fought for 2 years. She died on a Sunday morning in March, at home, in the bedroom she'd shared with Dad for 43 years. I was holding her left hand. Dad was holding her right. 47 people came to the funeral. Our pastor, her book club, neighbors, the woman from the dry cleaners who always saved Mom's favorite hangers. 47 people showed up to say goodbye to Linda Langford. Renee wasn't one of them. Dad didn't say her name that day. He sat in the front pew, shoulders straight, jaw set. He held my hand during the hymn. When we got home, and he went to the kitchen and made himself a cup of coffee, and I noticed his hands shaking for the first time in my life. After the funeral, something shifted. I'd find Dad late at night sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through the old file cabinet. Folders, bank statements, writing things down in his small, careful handwriting. I assumed it was grief taking shape. Congestive heart failure. That was the diagnosis 14 months after Mom died. The cardiologist explained it like a math problem: fluid, pressure, percentages, and I sat there translating it into what it actually meant. My father's heart was giving out. I'd spent 12 years as a nurse at the Hadley Community Clinic. I knew what CHF looked like. I knew the trajectory. So I did what I'd always done. I showed up. I managed his medications and cooked low-sodium meals he complained about with a grin, drove him to appointments, helped him into the shower on bad days, slept with my bedroom door open so I could hear if he called out at night. Our neighbor Doris Pemberton brought over a casserole every Wednesday. She'd been next door for 25 years. She'd sit with Dad on the porch while I ran to the pharmacy, and I'd come back to find them arguing about the Reds' pitching rotation. "You're a saint, Willa," Doris said one afternoon. "He'd do the same for me." Not everyone saw it that way. At a family gathering that spring, my cousin Lisa pulled me aside and said, "People are talking, you know. They say you're just staying for the house." I didn't respond to that. I finished my plate, helped clean up, and drove Dad home. One evening in late August, and Dad was sitting up in bed, more alert than he'd been in weeks. He motioned me closer. "I need you to call Gerald Marsh tomorrow." Gerald Marsh, the attorney on Main Street, 30 years in practice. Dad had never mentioned a lawyer to me before. "Okay, Dad, I'll call him." "Good." He squeezed my hand. "And Willa, don't ask me what it's about. Not yet." I didn't. He was still my father. It wasn't my place to question him. Dad died at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, exactly 7 years and 2 days after Renee walked out. I was beside him. His breathing had changed around midnight, slower, with longer pauses between each one, like he was deciding whether to take the next. I knew the sound. I'd heard it at the clinic more times than I could count. But knowing what it means and sitting through it with your own father are two completely different things. His last breath was quiet. No struggle, just a long exhale, and then the room was still. I sat with him for 10 minutes before I called 911. I don't know why. Maybe I needed the silence. Maybe I needed to say the things I hadn't said yet. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to let strangers into the room. His coffee mug was still on the nightstand, half full, already cold. I planned the funeral alone, picked the flowers, white lilies, his favorite, same as Mom's service, wrote the obituary, called Pastor Davies, sorted through his closet for the navy suit he wore to Mom's funeral, the only suit he owned. I didn't try to contact Renee. I hadn't had a working number for her in over 3 years. Her old email bounced, and honestly, even if I'd had a way to reach her, I wasn't sure I would have. That sounds cold. Maybe it is, but I'd watched my mother die asking for her younger daughter, and that daughter never came. I wasn't going to set myself up for that again. The service was small, 40 people. The same community that had carried us through Mom's death showed up for Dad's. I stood at the podium and talked about a man who built things: bookshelves, porches, a family. I didn't mention Renee. Nobody asked. Gerald Marsh's office was on the second floor above the hardware store on Main Street. Wood-paneled walls, a brass desk lamp, and a window that looked out over the parking lot of the Presbyterian church. He'd been practicing law in Hadley for 30 years, and he looked exactly like what you'd expect. White hair, reading glasses, yet a handshake that meant something. "Willa, thank you for coming in." He opened a manila folder. Inside was Dad's will, dated 18 months before his death, witnessed by Gerald and his paralegal, notarized. "Your father left the house and all associated property to you, full ownership, no conditions." I stared at him. "And Renee?" Gerald glanced at the document. "Renee receives a bequest of $1. I blinked. $1? It's a deliberate provision. It ensures no one can argue that your father accidentally overlooked her. He specifically included her to make it clear the exclusion was intentional. I sat back in the chair. The leather creaked. Can she contest it? She can try, but your father was thorough. Gerald paused. He came to me 18 months ago with very clear instructions. He was sharp, fully competent. I documented everything. Gerald reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, Dad's handwriting on the front. Just my name, Willa. Your father told me to give you this only if Renee comes back for the house. Not before. Those were his exact words. I held the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. Do I open it now? Only if she shows up. That's what he wanted. I drove home. Put the envelope in the kitchen drawer next to the measuring cups. For some reason, it felt right there, tucked between the ordinary things that held our daily life together. I didn't open it. 2 weeks after the funeral, the messages started. First, it was Aunt Carol. Honey, did you see what Renee posted on Facebook? Then Cousin Lisa. You might want to look at your sister's page. I hadn't been on Facebook in months, hadn't needed to. But that evening, I pulled it up on my phone, typed Renee's name, and there it was. A public profile. Hundreds of posts stretching back over a year, and every single one told the same story, just not the real one. My family chose a house over their own daughter. I was cut off for speaking the truth. Grief doesn't care about grudges, but apparently my family does. And then the most recent one, posted 3 days after Dad died. My father just passed. I wasn't even told. I had to find out through a stranger's Facebook post. 7 years of silence and they couldn't even give me a phone call. 412 reactions. At 209 comments. Hearts, crying emojis, paragraphs from strangers telling Renee how brave she was, how toxic her family sounded, how she deserved better. Nobody in those comments knew that Dad had begged her to come home. Nobody knew about the voicemails, the letters, the unanswered texts. Nobody knew she'd missed her own mother's funeral. My hands were shaking. I could feel the anger crawling up the back of my neck, hot, electric. I could have written a response. I could have posted the truth right there in her comment section and let the internet sort it out. But my father had just died, and I wasn't going to turn his death into a comment section. I put my phone face down on the counter, poured a glass of water, drank it standing at the sink. One comment at the bottom of Renee's post caught my eye before I looked away. You should get a lawyer. That's your inheritance too. The phone rang on a Friday morning while I was making coffee. Unknown number, area code I didn't recognize. Ms. Langford, my name is Nathan Driscoll. I'm an attorney representing your sister, Renee Langford Hale. I set the mug down. I'm listening. His voice was polished, careful, the kind of careful that comes from knowing exactly how much he's being paid per hour. Ms. Langford Hale would like to discuss the terms of your father's estate, specifically the disposition of the family home. It's not the family home, it's my home. My father left it to me. A brief pause, paper shuffling on his end. Ms. Langford Hale believes there may be grounds to contest the will on the basis of undue influence. She's concerned that the testamentary document doesn't reflect your father's true wishes. Undue influence. The legal way of saying I manipulated a dying man. My father made his decision with a clear mind. His attorney can confirm that. I understand. Ms. Langford Hale would prefer to resolve this amicably. She's suggesting an in-person meeting. I looked out the kitchen window. Dad's bird feeder was still hanging from the oak tree. A cardinal sat on the rim, tilting its head. Fine. I'm hosting a memorial gathering for my father next Saturday. She can come after that. We'll talk at the house. I'll relay that to my client. Mr. Driscoll? Yes? Tell her to bring whatever paperwork she wants. I'll be here. I hung up. Maz stood there for a moment with my hand still on the phone. The cardinal was gone. I wasn't going to hide from this. If Renee wanted to come back and stake her claim, she could do it where people knew us. In the house she abandoned, in front of the neighbors who watched me carry our parents through the end. Let her bring her lawyer. I'd be at the kitchen table. Let me pause here for a second. My sister hadn't spoken to us in 7 years. She didn't come to our mother's funeral. And now she had a lawyer calling me, saying I manipulated our dying father. If you've ever been the one who stayed, the one who showed up every single day while someone else disappeared, and then got accused of having an agenda, you know exactly what that feels like. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me. I'm reading every single one. All right, back to what happened next. Saturday came with a pale October sky and the smell of cinnamon from the apple cake Doris brought over at 8 in the morning. I made two, she said, setting them on the counter. Harold would have eaten one himself. By 11, the house was full. 28 people. Neighbors, friends from Dad's woodworking club, a few of his old clients, the postman who delivered our mail for 19 years. The dining table was covered with casseroles, pie, fried chicken, and a plate of sugar cookies from the ladies at First Presbyterian. Frank Hewitt, Dad's closest friend, as a retired carpenter who'd worked alongside him for 20 years, stood by the mantel with a cup of coffee and told the story about the time Dad measured a cabinet wrong by 1/8 of an inch and tore the whole thing apart to start over. Every nail, every board, Harold wrote it down, Frank said, shaking his head with a sad smile. That man could account for a penny from 1987. People laughed. The warm kind. The kind that comes from knowing someone so well that even their stubbornness is something you miss. I stood at the kitchen sink, washing a serving spoon, listening. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't since Mom died. Dad was in every corner. The shelves he built, the trim he stained, the squeaky third step he kept saying he'd fix. I was drying my hands on the kitchen towel when the doorbell rang. The living room went quiet, not all at once, in a wave. Conversations trailed off, heads turned. I draped the towel over the oven handle and walked toward the front door. Through the glass panel, I could see a black dress, a gray suit, a leather briefcase. I already knew who it was. I opened the door. Renee stood on the porch in a black sheath dress and oversized sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast. Her hair was different, shorter, blonder. She looked thinner. Beside her, Nathan Driscoll wore a charcoal suit and held a leather briefcase close to his body like a shield. Behind me, the living room had gone dead silent. I could feel every pair of eyes. Renee pulled off her sunglasses, same blue eyes as Mom, same jawline as Dad. She scanned the room, the people, the food, at the photos of Harold on the mantel, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I would have been here sooner, but nobody told me Dad was sick. I had to find out he died from a Facebook post. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone near the window set down a plate. I held the door open wider. You're welcome to stay, Renee. There's food. I'm not here for the casserole. Then what are you here for? You know exactly why I'm here. Doris Pemberton stepped forward from the kitchen doorway, her hands still dusted with flour. She didn't say anything yet, just positioned herself where she could see everything. Nathan Driscoll cleared his throat. Perhaps we could speak somewhere private, Ms. Langford. She's my sister, I said. She can say whatever she needs to say. Renee's chin lifted. At that old gesture, the one she used when she was about to dig in. I recognized it the way you recognize weather. You don't have to think about it. You just know what's coming. Fine, she said. She stepped inside. The door closed behind them, and the memorial was no longer a memorial. It was something else entirely. Renee didn't sit down. She stood in the middle of the living room, between the coffee table and the fireplace, and turned to face the room like she'd rehearsed it. I need all of you to know something. Her voice cracked on the first syllable, and I couldn't tell if it was real or performance. Maybe both. My father's will was changed in the last year of his life. Willa was the only person with access to him. She isolated him from the rest of the family. She influenced him. And now she inherits a $415,000 house while I get nothing. The room shifted, feet shuffled. Someone near the hallway crossed their arms. Frank Hewitt set his coffee down on the mantel and stared at Renee like he was trying to solve a puzzle. That's not true, Doris said from the kitchen doorway. Her voice was flat, certain. Willa didn't isolate anybody. She fed him, bathed him, drove him to every appointment for 3 years.